Well, it's a privilege to be back here in Grand Lake, and it's really a privilege to be asked to speak with you all tonight. Donna called me and said that they were going to put together some kind of an arts program, arts, music. This town has long been a mecca for artists, for writers, for disenchanted folks that are looking for themselves and come here to a place. It's a great honor to be back here again. We here gathered tonight, we represent, just a portion of the people who live here in town. Some of it's because of the weather, some of it because this is the first thing of a series. And also because a town like Grand Lake, thank you Lord, is a town of individualists. We often march to a different drum. And we find in this beautiful place, a place that is very accepting of differences, of idiosyncrasies, of talent, of friendship. It's just a wonderful place. I don't know some of you were born here. I'm guessing that most of you were born somewhere else, and somehow or other you came here. Maybe it was a vacation, maybe it was a friend, but something attracted you to this place. That's my story, and it's the story of so many people who have come, populated, built up this wonderful place. And many of us come, stay, and then the winds of change blow along and we move down the road. And that was my case too. But I can speak for myself, and I know I speak for others. Those who have come to love and live in Grand Lake, even if they move and live elsewhere, they'll always carry a part of Grand Lake in them, and they'll always love Grand Lake. I hadn't been here for a while, and coming back up, there was just this swell of emotion. And I had to pull my car over to the side of the road and just stop and think, oh my God, I forgot. And perfect timing. I came here yesterday in the midst of a snowstorm. Donna asked me to tell you about my coming here, my life. Everybody here has a story. Years ago on television, there was a thing called The Naked City, and it would always start out, there are 9 million, it was about New York City, there are 9 million stories in the Naked City, and this is one of them. That's kind of where I am. I was born in Golden, Colorado. My father went to the Colorado School of Mines, and then he went in working underground in a mine. When I graduated from high school, in 1966, Golden High School, I went to work in the mine, and he was furious with me because he thought I was going to screw up and make him look bad. I ended up, by circuitous route, going to college. Not able to finish college because I was in an automobile accident. Then ended up going to seminary. I need to tell you that story, and I'll try to make it brief. I was always an artist and a painter from early on. And I got fairly good at it. And after I had to drop out of college, because I was going to see a friend in the hospital in somebody else's car, and he didn't have insurance, and there was an accident, and I didn't have money, so that was the end of my college. So went to Denver. I worked as an illustrator for an advertising agency. They saw my talent. And then in Denver, I put together, because I knew so many good artists who were struggling, I ran an art gallery in Denver for a while. And I was minding my own business. I got married, had some children, was living in Golden, minding my own business, and I got a phone call from a fellow who I barely knew. He was from Golden. He had worked at Coors. And he said, "George, this is Roy Zeman." "Well, hello, Mr. Zeman." "George, I think you should come to seminary." He had quit his job at Coors and had gone to seminary to become an Episcopal priest. Well, I went to the Episcopal Church in Golden, Colorado. It was just a few walks down from my house, and my dog would follow me. Anyway, and I thought, well, that's the damnedest thing I've ever heard of. And I talked to my wife about it. Now, Roy Zeman's daughter was my wife's best friend. And so I thought, well, sure, why not? Some of you came to Grand Lakes. Yeah, why? Hell, sure, why not? I left our car with my wife, and I hitchhiked from Golden, Colorado to Lexington, Kentucky, where the seminary was. It was hot, it was summer. I got picked up by the police once. They thought I was a runaway from a nearby fort because my hair was cut real short. And I was in jail for about 8 hours, and I was reading my Bible, and the guy said, "If you say who you are, I'm going to let you go, because if you're who we think you are, we'll catch you again, but reading your Bible, go ahead and go." So, and I picked up with some other miscreant, and so we were both hitchhiking together. Finally, I got into Kentucky. Boy, was it hot, was it long. And I'm thumbing a ride, and I'm thumbing a ride, and I'm thumbing a ride. Everybody's passing. A station wagon pulls back up. Guy gets up, big guy. Says, "George? Mr. Zeman?" Honest to God. The very last length of the journey when I was right there in the city. And he said, told me later, that was the first time I was on this part of the highway, because it was a toll road. And he was in seminary, and he was scrimping and saving every bit of money, but he had a bad asthma attack, and he wanted to go home as quickly as he could with the medication. That was the first time he took that road, the very day that I was thumbing my ride. I couldn't believe it. And then he said, "We're going to take you to see the bishop and head of the seminary." Well, all right, fine. And he started prodding me about what I was supposed to say, and I didn't know what I was supposed to say. "You're the one that asked me to come. I don't know what to say." And it just bothered me. I don't know where, it wasn't me. It was not me. I said, "Roy, give me your Bible." I didn't know much about the Bible. He gave me the Bible. I'm thumbing through it. And honest to God, as the Lord is my witness, I just found this place that, "Do not ask me what I shall say, for the Lord shall give me the words." It was right there in the Bible. And I didn't even know it was there, but just something. I take no credit for anything I've done. I really don't. And I went to see the bishop, and I went to see the head of the seminary, and they said, what did you get your bachelor's in?" "My what?" I said, "Where did you graduate from college?" "Oh, I didn't graduate from college. I had a wreck and I had to quit." You didn't go, "I went to college." "You didn't graduate from college?" "This is a master's program, son." Roy didn't tell me that. And the bishop goes, "Well, you're here now." So they had me go to a psychiatrist, and they had me go to this, and they had me go to that. And honest to God, they said, "You can come to seminary." Whoa. I ended up got my family out there. Ended up, we'll show some, I forgot about the slideshow. I don't know why we have a slideshow, but anyway, there's pictures in it. Some of them of me, right? Am I supposed to tell you to push a button?
Yeah.
Push a button. I don't know what. That's my name. One of my paintings. It's similar to this one, but it's different. Push the next button. I don't know what these are. See, there's the next one. These lights are bright, so it doesn't show up as well. But anyway, I went to seminary. I knew I had to get a job, and so I got a job as an illustrator for a magazine that they had there, the Lexington Herald, and then I worked for the newspaper, and then I went to work for a liquor store there. It was called Thoroughbred Liquors, and I went to seminary. I graduated from seminary, and then I realized, now what am I going to do? I've got my degree, and I found out that nobody was hiring new priests that year, because in that year the Episcopal Church was going to have a national convention to decide if they were going to allow women to be ministers. Can you imagine women ministers? My God, what's the world coming to? So my bishop said, George, I don't have any more spots for you here in Kentucky, you know, and we're just holding off until we find out what's happening with this election. Because I'm telling you, this is in the South, you understand. If they do this, we just may secede from the Episcopal Church and start our own church. So we're not doing nothing. Go for it. I wrote every other bishop in the United States. And they said the same thing. We're waiting until they decide what they're going to do at General Convention, if they're going to have women priests or not. So you get back with me in a couple of months. Well, I knew some guys. They had waited too long. I was ordained a deacon. They have a pecking order. It's like military. You start out as a private. I was ordained a deacon. Wonderful ceremony. Bishop laid hands on me and asked the Holy Spirit to come into me, and etc. Well, I still needed a job. You're a deacon for such a period of time, and then you go through another examination, and if they let you, then you become ordained a priest. If they really like you, in the end you might even become a bishop. If they really like you as a bishop, they might even let you to be the supreme bishop of the Episcopal Church. I met him. He had me do his portrait. It's right there. That's it. It was anyway. So I realized I was under the gun. Because I knew people, they waited too long to go from being a deacon to be ordained a priest. And they never made it. Because it was like you've been on the shelf too long. There must be something wrong with you that you're not a priest yet. So they'd gone to seminary all those years and they never got it for the. So I wrote to every bishop and I got all these answers back. We're not hiring, not hiring. Somehow, I don't know, somebody told me, or in the middle of the night. Well, the Canadian church, the Anglican Church of Canada, associated with the English church, Anglican church, right to them. It's the same thing as the Episcopal Church. So I wrote to every bishop in Canada. Got a list of them. I got one letter back. A guy thanked me. He was the bishop of the Diocese of Athabasca. You never heard of the place. He said, we have a lovely mission here that has been vacant for 3 years. It's on the shores of lovely Lake Athabasca. And if you can get up here before freeze up, the job is yours. This was all code word to me. But I knew my father-in-law, who was in the oil business, had been all over Canada, especially up in Alberta. And his name was Doug Ball. And I said, Doug, have you ever heard of this place called Fort Chipewyan on Lake Athabasca? He said, oh, hell yes. I've been up there myself. He says, lots of oil up there, you know. I said, no, I didn't know that. I said, what's it like? He said, oh, it's real pretty. Real cold, but real pretty. So I said, yeah, I'll take the job. Met with the bishop at Peace River, Alberta. Signed my documents. And That night, we got a call from Roy Zeman again. Roy Zeman, remember that guy? To stop? He said, Roy. I said, George, this is Roy. I said, oh, everything went right. Max died. Max got killed tonight. Max was my best friend. Max was my wife's brother. Max had just gotten back from the Vietnam War, and he was working on what was called the Straight Creek Tunnel. That's that tunnel, Eisenhower Tunnel they call it now, on I-70. He was working on that, and he got killed. And so we were up in Alberta. We came back for the funeral. Right away in my ministry, before I started my ministry, there was a cloud on it. And when we got up there, had this wonderful time, built up the church. It was a beautiful place. I discovered I wasn't being paid enough, so I went to work as a carpenter. We were building houses. The government was paying us to build houses for Indians living up there. Most of my people were Indians. And from them, I came to have an abiding appreciation, love, respect for American Indians, for Native Canadian Indians. And they've been, as these pictures warrant, a big part of my life, for all of my life. This painting here, you can see it later. You can see it now. This is a painting of Fort Chippewa. It's fairly desolate. Now, I painted it as it would have looked, say, in the 1860s or 1870s, where fur traders would come to buy furs.
It's not on there.
Now, that's what these guys are wearing. They're wearing old-fashioned clothes. That's the way they used to look. But everything else in the picture is exactly the way it was when I still lived there. I painted myself in the picture. That's me. And I painted my team of dogs. Oh, I had a dog sled. My team of dogs in the picture. So here's the sled full of furs. Here's a Cree Indian, and he is bargaining with the fur trader for how much he's going to get for his furs. And this was the place where we actually had a cafe, and here's folks watching. That was the way the folks used to dress in those days. That was the way I dressed in those days. I still have these moccasins right there. And there was an experience that was pretty neat. I loved it. My wife had some difficulties with it. And she decided it was time to go back for a vacation. And so she went for a vacation. And one day I came back from work, and there was a knock on the door. And I built the church up. It was wonderful. And we had wonderful relations with the church down the street, the Roman Catholic Church. There weren't very many cars there because you'd have to fly your car in so you could get it there. So hardly, so people walked. So the Anglican Church was way over here. It was settled back in the 1860s. And the Roman Catholic Church was way over here. And it was run by Father Queff from Belgium, who missed Belgium and missed his mother and missed his roses. And so we would get together sometimes. But the Indians from one tribe that would go to church at Mass at the Roman Catholic Church, they would walk by our church and they would throw, it was just a little ritual, they would throw a little rock on our church, maybe on the window. And then some of our Anglican people, when they were walking there, they would throw a little rock on the Roman Catholic Church. But we priests liked each other, and there was a nun there too, and we liked her. Got a knock on the door. There was a member of the Royal Mounted Canadian Police in the whole thing, in the red wool tunic and in the Smokey Bear hat and stuff like that. And he was standing there, and he had tears in his eyes. And he said, "George, I've been meaning to talk to you. I've had this letter for a couple of days. I just couldn't. Here. There was divorce papers from my wife." Well, I didn't know what to do. Well, I decided, if you really love her, if you love your children, you'll try to put it back together again. And so I had to tell my bishop, I had to tell my congregation. I'd been there 3 years, That was actually longer than many of the people that stayed there before. I was planning on staying there longer. And he said, it's all right, we'll figure out what to do. You need to try to take care of your family. Well, nothing ever happened. Nothing got put back together again. So I had to find some way to make a living. And I went to work as an illustrator for an advertising department of a big, big company. I was an illustrator. It was kind of boring, the things that we were drawing. But at lunch, there were these guys, they were crazy as all get out. They laughed and they had such a good time, and they just did whatever they wanted. It was the sign painters group. They were just as crazy as all get out, and they were so talented. And I fell in with them, and I learned to paint signs. And it wasn't easy. It was now any business that has a sign, they're generated with computers. Computers have done a wonderful thing. And they're vinyl. But in those days, before computers, it was with a brush, a very special sign painter's brush, and very special sign painter's paint. And it wasn't an easy thing to do. And I learned how to paint signs with these sign painters, and then they were so kind. Some of them had night jobs. And then they knew other sign painters. They would get together, and they'd have these great times, a lot of beer and a lot of hamburgers, and talking about this guy and that guy and this sign that didn't work. And they just took me under their wing. And I quit my job as the illustrator with a paycheck. And these sign painters were so kind. They'd say, I'm too busy for this job, George. Will you go down and you'll do this and this and this? And I would do it. I would go paint a sign for them. And then I'd come back 3 days later and say, that looks so much better than I thought I had painted it. They'd come back behind me. And they'd done it upright. And I still got the money. And it wasn't from the church. It was from sign painters that I learned about love and goodness and kindness and having a whole lot of fun doing it at the same time. Well, I was in seventh heaven. So I had this meteoric career. The job failed for me in Canada, trying to put my life together. My wife didn't happen. Learned the sign business. I tried going to different churches, different bishops, trying to get another job at a priest. And they said, well, it says here you're divorced. I said, well, yes, I am. Sorry. I couldn't get a job because I was divorced. So that's when I really got into sign painting. Called my business Signs and Wonders. There was a passage in the Bible. The Jews demand signs and the Gentiles demand wonders. So my business was Berlin Signs and Wonders. And I painted signs for the Coors Company. I painted signs all over, and I got good at it. And I painted signs for a lady, and she had 2 little kids, and they were sweet, and we ended up dating and courting, and we got married. And her name was Diane. And one day, a guy had painted a lot of his restaurants for him. I did his menus, because I already had that kind of graphics. I did all of his signs. He was a big restaurateur, big shot, and he put restaurants all over the place. And he said, George, I'm starting a new restaurant. I want you to paint my signs for me, if you will. Okay. It's not in Denver. It's up in a place called Grand Lake. Okay, fine. So I told him I would do it. I had to finish another sign job first. What I had to finish was I did as big as this screen, not just as big as the picture, as big as the screen. I did a huge sign on plexiglass that was going to be lifted up by a crane and put in a huge metal frame on top of a building, on the top of a 7-story building. So I did by then I had a guy working with me too. So we put this sign together. We called the company, truck took the sign over the building. I called the crane company. So the crane took me up on the roof, and then the crane put the sign up on the roof. It was windy. It was a cold day. And me and Taylor were working to put the sign in its place, and something happened. I don't know what happened. It was windy, but the sign hit me real hard over the side of the parking lot, and I hung on to the plexiglass sign for dear life. I'm 7 stories above the parking lot, hanging onto a sign, and it's swinging around like this, and I'm yelling at the crane. The crane operator didn't know what he was doing. He was a new guy. And so he was trying to put it in place, and instead of making it better, he made it worse. And he got me higher, and he got me swinging, and I was hanging on there for dear life, and my hands were starting to bleed because that plexiglass isn't very wide, you know. And finally, by the grace of God, thank you, Jesus, he did get me back over the roof, and I dropped down. It wasn't much of a drop, maybe I don't know, 6, 7 feet, something like that. And I said, we'll do this tomorrow. And I went home to my wife, and I said, you know what? I think I've had it with this. I think I've had it. And I talked to Bill that night. Bill, who was buying this new restaurant in Grand Lake, and I said, you know, I think I'm getting out of the sign business because, you know, he said, you know, you're a hell of a cook. He'd been to our house sometimes. He said, you're a good cook. I said, thank you. He said, why don't you come on up and why don't you run my restaurant for me? Well, that sounds preposterous. But the truth was, during my sign painting career, I painted signs and done menus for a lot of restaurants. And a lot of these restaurateurs had become friends of mine because I like to cook and they like to cook, and we would talk about things, and I could give out pointers to them. And I had done the same thing with Bill. I told Bill, don't put that on your menu. Nobody will buy that. You'll just end up throwing it away. Don't do that. And you know, this woman you got working for you, she's a drunk. Did you know that? You should know that. I mean, I'm sorry to tell you this, but she's not only drinking up your money, she's stealing your money. He said, George, you know how to run a restaurant, don't you? I don't know about that. He said, come on up and run this restaurant for me in Grand Lake. Do my signs and run the restaurant. Well, that was on the heels of my almost getting killed as a sign painter. And I was tired of it. And I thought, God, you know, it'd be nice to have a steady job for once for a while. Just every day to go to the same place. And I said, yeah, sure, I'll do that. I'll check it out. And we came to Grand Lake. And there was a place called Six. You remember Six? Some of you know, some of you don't. It was on the corner there, down Main Street. And there was a little restaurant there. I can't remember what it was called now. There was a restaurant on the corner. And there's a restaurant there now, I guess.
It's called the Sagebrush.
Okay, the Sagebrush, thank you. That's right, we talked about that. And up above, there was a hotel with rooms and stuff. And so my wife, Diane, she was going to run the rooms, and I was going to run the restaurant. And it worked perfectly. It was fantastic. It was great. We had some fun, interesting things that happened. One thing that happened along the way, this was probably around the time, somewhat after, the Iranians kicked out the Shah. And so there were a lot of Iranians. They keep coming up in the news. There were some Iranians that came to Grand Lake. And they rented a room from us. Well, we had to ask them to leave because they had a little picnic on the floor. They said now they did have a little sheet of aluminum on it, but that's where they did their barbecue, right on the floor, and it did sort of ruin the floor. And they didn't know, it wasn't their fault. They were from Iran, but did that for a long time. And Bill was a pretty good guy when he was sober, and when he wasn't, Bill Jones. Some of you may remember him. He bought a house down on the lake. Made a lot of money. One day, it was coming up July 4th. And he'd already told me, from now on, you cook. And you take care of the waitresses. And you do that. I'll take care of the money. And I'll take care of the ordering. He just couldn't let go. You know, he was one of those kind of guys. Couldn't let go. So I said, all right, fine. 4th of July came, and he gave me a call. It was in the morning, and he said, has the ice cream come yet? No, we don't have, Bill, I told you the other day, we don't have any ice cream. What about the hamburgers? The hamburger come. Bill, I told you the other day, we don't have any hamburger. You said you were going to order it. You were supposed to order that. You were supposed to get, Bill, you were supposed to do it. You said you were going to do it. I don't order, remember? Well, he threw a conniption fit and blamed me, and you're fired. Get your ass out of here. So that was the end of I went to my wife, and I said, honey, I guess we're not working here anymore. She said, good. I didn't trust that guy. I didn't like him. But we were living in Grand Lake. Well, I painted the signs. There you go. I can't see the light. I painted a bunch of restaurant signs. Let's see what we've got here. I'll tell you about Doc Lee in a minute.
Well, let's go to Soda Springs,
Okay, well,
and then we'll come back.
okay. I thought we'd put them in order, but we were hasty.
I think it's near me now.
This is one of the signs I painted when I was in Golden for our little place. Go ahead and do the next one. No, take it down. Take it down one.
This one?
Take it down.
Down is in that way?
There, that one. Little more. See, I was not only a sign painter, I was also an illustrator. That was on the side of our little restaurant up there. So, go ahead and take it up now. We ended up coming to Grand Lake. And right at the end, where George Pierce, there was the playhouse that was at the end of Main Street.
He tore down the Pine Colonnette.
There, thank you. There was an empty building, and so Diane and I, we ran this little art gallery. And it was a lot of fun, and we did pretty well at it. Did really quite well at it.
That's where Charlie's parking lot is.
Okay, thank you. So I was out of the restaurant business in Grand Lake, but I painted so many signs. I know we got some of the signs up here on this thing, what we did. But anyway,
Let's do another one.
I did that one. What's the next one? Oh, that's the end of it. Okay. Oh, this is what I want to tell you about. This is fun. Take it up a little higher. I know a lot of you guys probably knew Bob Sharp. He and his son ran the Standard gas station.
Where Lone Eagle is.
Okay.
And that's George on the right.
Well, anyway, I had painted this picture here, and I know it's in the picture, of a mountain man to sell. And I did sell it. And Bob saw it. I'm sorry, different mountain man. Bob saw the painting I did of the mountain man, and he said, I got a beard prettier than that. Oh, I know what it is. It was this drawing. Over here's this drawing. That's what it was. This is a long time ago. I did these prints, sold them in my gallery. An Indian, a mountain man. Bob Sharp saw this and said, I got a beard pretty as that. I said, yes, you do, Bob. You sure do. He said, could you paint me like that mountain man? I said, well, yeah, for a price. And he said, okay. And so I painted him as a mountain man. And then he said, we're going to have a big party to celebrate it. I said, okay, fine. And so, they're telling me it's almost time to stop, I'm sure. So he booked Dougal's Mountain Inn. Some of you remember Dougal's Mountain Inn?
Sure.
And I thought, well, that's a crazy thing to do, to have everybody come just to see the unveiling of your portrait. That's a silly thing to do. So I decided what I would do, I'd make it interesting for people. So some of the young pretty girls that were in town, here's what we did. They wore cowboy boots and short shorts and a vest and a cowboy hat, and I painted different signs for them, different paintings. One was of Mona Lisa, but with Bobby Sharp's face on it. And so the girls would walk around we were all eating our fried chicken, and the girls would show the pictures. And then there was one of George Washington and Bobby, but they were all good and they were all funny and they all had a funny little caption on them. And he loved it. And then we did the sale of the painting, bought the painting. And then, by golly, he didn't have the right to do it. I had the copyright to do it. But about 3 weeks later, when I drove by his gas station, the windows of his gas station were festooned with reproductions, with prints of the painting. Life-size prints. I said, Bob, you can't do that. I have the copyright. Well, I've done it. What are you going to do about it? So that's why there came to be some of these prints. There's lots of story here, but let me cut to the quick. I had been ordained a priest, and I was missing it. I was going to the Episcopal Church. Chap Cramner was running the church that was over, up in town, and it was certainly nice to be in church again. But I decided maybe I should be a priest. And then something else happened. A guy came into our gallery. He saw the paintings. He bought a bunch of paintings. He said, I love your artwork a lot. Talked to me. And then he said, I'm sorry to see you have to work so hard painting signs, painting pictures. I had a little studio outside of town between, anyway. And he said, I hate to see you working so hard. He said, what I'd like to do, he had a little house on the lake. He said, I'd like to put you on my payroll. And you can do whatever you want. You can paint whatever you want. And not have to worry about a thing. I just could hardly believe it. And he was as good as his word. And I was free. And I began to do a lot of paintings. Painting here of Mesa Verde. I did a bunch of silk screens. We sold them. And then he said, if ever you want to come out to California to see us, come on out. We'll find a place for you. It was a particularly cold winter here in Grand Lake. And I said, yeah, I think we'll do that. And so my wife and I went out to California, found a beautiful place, and said, this isn't too bad. It was right on the coast, right on the ocean. And so we were there. And we were painting. And I was making money and selling my paintings. And my good friend Ray Ellison was his name. It turns out he had gone from being absolutely broke to figuring out a way to make money. And the way he figured out a way to make money was to start up stores that sold used clothing. And he called his first one ARC. For something, Association of Retarded Citizens. He started that whole thrift store industry. And he made a freaking fortune. And he had homes, it turns out, all over the world. And one of his homes was here on the lake.
It still is. It still is there on the lake. It's on Grand Lake Lane, just past Ben Blair and Christina Burke's home.
Okay.
And his son owns the big home on the river.
Okay.
Just,
he has two sons, yeah. Mark and Matt were his two sons.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Matt is the one who owns.
Well, God bless Ray Ellison.
Yeah.
And then something weird happened. We were in California, and I got a message from the Bishop of Colorado. a letter. And it was a mandatory, all priests must come to this convention we're having in Denver. Well, I was still an Episcopal priest associated with Diocese of Colorado. So I said to my wife, well, honey, let's go back. I mean, we can see some friends, and I got this thing. And so we went there, and the convention was in Glenwood Springs, and I signed in, and the elevator door opened, and there was the bishop, Bishop Fry. He had an amazing voice. He said that he looked like Gregory Peck, and he sounded like God. That's how he was described. The elevator door opened, and he said, George, I thought you were in California. I said, Bishop, I was, but I came here for the conference. He said, I've got priests within 50 miles that haven't come. He arranged to have breakfast with me through an intermediary the next morning. And they said, would you be willing to come back and be in a church? I said, would I? They said, we were going to close down the church in Breckenridge because it hasn't done anything. They only got 9 people that go. And if you do that, we'd love to have you back. I said, how much? You got? We can't pay you anything. Can't pay you anything. So let me think about it. I thought about it. I talked to my wife. She said, what about this thing with Ray? I said, well, Ray said you could live anywhere. I went to the bishop and I said, here's what I'll do. You give me 50 Bibles and 50 prayer books, and you give me 1 year. You don't mess with me. You don't pull the rug out from under my feet. And we'll see what happens within a year. So I was doing that for free. The thing with Ray went south. So George, I understand what you want to do. And God bless you. And you're on your own. Okay. So I was back where I started from, painting signs, painting pictures, and building up a church. And things went well. Things went well, except that my wife this wife, had really not been part of the Episcopal Church, really. Didn't really much get into it. And she did find favor with a fellow who was a Pentecostal guy, and that marriage went south. And so it just took a long time to recover. So for years, I was painting. Then I went to Mississippi for a while. Somebody had gone to my church in Breckenridge, and they liked the way I talked to their children. And they said, you know, we'd like you to come to Mississippi and to be the dean of students at an Episcopal prep school that we have down there in Mississippi. And I said, would you pay me? And so we did that. And he did that for a number of years, and then missing kids, and that marriage went south, and I decided there's something wrong with me. And then by the grace of God, I went to church one Sunday, and this lady priest up there at the cathedral, I knew her. I remember, oh yeah, I worked at St. John's Cathedral in Denver. I worked there for about 6 or 7 months, and I remember her, and she remembered me. And something happened, and sparks flew, and we fell in love, and 26 years ago, got married. And we're still married. And so for a long time, then for 18 years, I was a priest up in, well, it doesn't matter. Priest here, priest there. The towns don't matter. What matters is the people. But it's been a good life and a full life, and I just ended a 3-year stint being the priest in another town because they hired me for one Sunday, and they said, can you stay for a while? And so And that ended last year. And I realized it's probably time. I guess what I'm saying, I don't know what I'm saying. It's just that they asked me to tell the story, so I've told my story. One thing that has impressed me the most, though, not about my life, but about the people I've met. I have met amazing people that will never make it in the newspapers, but people that are just solid gold. I'll close with this. Because I was a pastor, every once in a while some of the people in my church would die, and I would conduct their funerals. And funeral directors got to know me. And then I started getting calls and said, George, we've got a family here, they don't have a pastor, can you do a funeral here for us? And it got to the point, especially after I wasn't doing all those many church things in the weekday, I was doing at least 1 or 2 funerals a week, sometimes 3 a day. I got a call from a funeral director, and he said, George, you don't know me. I'm the new funeral director here for Crown Hill. Do you know how many funerals you've done for us here? I said, well, I've done a lot, I know that. I said, you've done over 3,000 funerals for us. I saved every funeral bulletin in cigar boxes. And I had a stack of cigar boxes. They are all real people. I learned the names of their dogs and the names of their kids and where they went to school, their addresses. I visited them. They still call me. I realized it's all about people. And it's all about love. And it's all about, we're only here for a short time. And there's so many things you can't control. But one thing that we can control is to be for the people around us. Well, to be there for them. And to listen to them and find out who they are. I have heard the most amazing, unbelievable stories from just regular, ordinary people. Genuine heroes. And I know if I knew all of your stories, it would just be amazing too. It would be a best-selling book. I couldn't believe it when I was asked to come up here and just talk about my painting. I don't know why, and I hadn't been here for a while, and it's such a beautiful place. And what it's reminded me of, time goes by so fast. And in the end, most things don't matter except that we are genuine, that we really seek to be not only be truthful, but to be the truth. Good, bad, or ugly, to be true. And to care. And to take time. And that's enough. And somebody asked, there was a saint called, his name was St. John Chrysostom. I was married once at St. John Chrysostom Church, one of my 3. St. John Chrysostom was asked this question. Do you believe there is a heaven? And he said, I don't care. He said, what care I for heaven? I'm in heaven now. And I realized good, bad, ugly, healthy, not healthy, wealthy, not wealthy. This is good. This is good. It's good when we make it good. And I'm just so grateful. And I know you are too. And I just want to say thank you in a short prayer, and then I'm done. Lord, thank you for life. We bless unto you all those whom we love, those whom we see no more, those yet with us. we thank you for the joy of this beautiful world. Thank you so much. Amen.
Ellen, before we break up, could we just see the rest of the slides that Will has, and maybe George could tell us about it? Let's-
Doc Lee, I don't know how many, Doc Lee was here forever. He was an interesting guy. He lived here. He had been at one, before there was a policeman here, he was elected to be like the sheriff, the policeman, whatever. And so here's the story. There was a woman who was drunk and disorderly in one of the hotels. And so he arrested her. He would call the women, little lady. Come on, little lady. Come on, little lady. He always dressed, that's the way he looked. So she was fighting and kicking him, so he's fine. So he handcuffed her. She was naked. He brought her down from the hotel naked. Handcuffed her to the steering wheel of his car, and he went into the bar and had a couple of drinks. And when he came out, little lady was all settled down. That's how he. Now his face looked like a road map because he had been, as he said by his own admission, he had been put away drunk more times than he could remember. He was quite the character. He ended up, I painted signs, and he would paint the backgrounds. He would paint buildings and stuff like that with one of his co-hosts. In a way, he was bigger than life. And so this lady, she bought the painting, and that's her standing next to it. Everybody called him Doc Lee. They called him Doc Lee because he was so good with animals, especially horses. His real name, I found out when he died. I did his funeral. His real name was Grant Lee. Can you imagine that? Kind of an amalgamation of the two warriors of the Civil War. Grant Lee. And he bequeathed one of his cowboy hats to me. I painted a lot of horses because I've hung out with a lot of people who have horses and are cowboys and stuff like that. This is just, I was down in Mexico and I saw, it's not a very good photograph of it, but I saw these two mules that were tied up to the beer joint, and I thought that was good, and so I took a little black and white snapshot of it and went home and painted it on later on. This is from the top of my studio. I took this last week. My studio, painting is so messy, I don't paint it in my home. So I bought a studio in downtown Denver. I own the 17th floor of a 17-story high building. It's an apartment building in Denver. And so that's out on the roof. And right now I've been painting a series of aspens because I've discovered aspens sell really well. There's aspens in these pictures. And it's not easy because there's all those little black spots on all of them. So these are different aspens in different stages because I'll work on one and then I'll set it in the window for the paint to dry, oil paint, and just pick up the next one because I've already got all the paints that I need. And the idea is that you can see this is probably the most finished one, and this one is 6 feet tall, so they're kind of big. I'll sell them in the fall when the tourists come back to look at the aspen. This is kind of take it up a little higher. This is a close-up of one of the aspen paintings I'm working on. We just threw this together, I guess, last night, so this is kind of disjointed. What else we got? Yeah, this is a little higher. I found a place where there was this beautiful, I don't even know what kind of flowers they are, but these red and violet flowers at the base of these aspen. boy, I gotta paint that, so that's what I've been working on for the past couple of weeks. You're familiar with this one.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't, until I saw the original again, I didn't realize what a nice painting it was, because in the poster, it's kind of reduced down, and the colors aren't quite as good as the original painting, and I'm so glad, Donna, that you got that painting, and I got to see it again. Raise it up a little bit. I married this couple after I did this painting. They were kind of going together and kind of not going together. He now is a judge. He was an attorney for years and years and years. Now he's kind of a retired judge. And I painted, I did the initial sketch in the park. They went to my church. I did the initial sketch in the parking lot of our church. And there was one of these little curves that separated the grass from the parking lot. And so I had them step on the curb so I could kind of see how it would look and their balance and stuff like that. And she didn't have a picnic basket, but she had a purse, so that's what we did. You know, life is funny. I baptized their son, and I buried their son several years later. Buried two of my own children. Buried one of my grandchildren. We never know what life will dish out. And it makes it all the more important to live life as well and as lovingly as we can. These are still good friends of mine. This is that sign in gold that I did for that fellow. Ended up running his restaurant for him. This was next to it. It says a mercantile store. It sold all kinds of stuff. To put it down a little bit, I started a series of paintings, and they sold out pretty well up in Central City, of some old kind of grandpa gangster with a cute little girl. I put myself in the background there, me with the glasses, but did a whole series of him doing different things, and they sold out really well. This is a picture of the frame that my wife, Diane, had. That's when I wasn't doing church business, and that's when everything was okay. And of course, the Chamber of Commerce sign. Got that one again. Oh, take it up. That's the gold leaf sign I did on the front window. The gold leaf is really hard to do. 23 karat gold. That was in Cherokee, but take it up a little bit. Unless it's not there. Well, I guess it's not there. This was.
On this.
Well, I know the names of. I never knew the names of the streets here in town. But that was Old Zix Market, and then I painted those signs, and that's when I first came here.
That's the sagebrush.
Sagebrush, okay, yeah.
There's the corner cupboard,
Yeah, okay,
where Talakwa Square is now.
okay. Oh, yeah. The next one, take that, I know where this next one is, I think. Okay. I don't know if you remember this fire, take it up a little higher so you can read it. That was the old fire truck, and that was in the parade. We used to have a lot of fun parties here. That was Nile.
Modern.
Thank you. And that was me there. There's the grocery store in the background. Another big parade. Where's Dougal? Go down. Keep going. The next one. That's Dougal. Dougal's Mountain
There
Inn.
it is, the Mountain Inn.
Yeah, that's right. Now, some of you came after all these characters, so sorry you didn't get to meet them if that's the case. I did a lot of real estate signs. This is a sandblasted sign I put up. I think that's in Granby. In fact, I know it is. It was.
It was.
Okay. Yeah, I did the logo. I made the Silver Creek logo for them, designed it, and then built their sign. Had stonemasons come in and do the stonework. I don't know if that's still there or not. cut out letters, pasted on the side of the building.
That became.
There's a sandblasted sign on the side right there.
That was Mountain Models.
I did a lot of restaurant signs because I did it. Learned a lot about restaurants that way.
Good evening.
Grand B again.
John Pritchard worked there for a while.
Okay. Yeah, I was the one that, I came up with that logo. I think it's still there. That was George Pierce's thing. That was, okay, that was in one of my church offices. That was the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church. Take it up a little bit more. And that was in one of my church offices there. Oh, this is nice. The last church I served, I've been there 17 years. I went to a church, the bishop called and said, we can't pay any money. Been there, done that. But there's a church that we think is going to close down. Is there any chance you can? I said, yeah, sure. I ended up being there for 17 years and built it up. And we built up a wonderful, sizable Spanish congregation. And then we had another congregation of Sudanese. And so it was just a wonderful thing to happen. And I don't know if you can move it over a little bit. Sarah was an Episcopal priest when I met her, when I was working at St. John's Cathedral. And somehow, by the grace of God, we got back together again. And we've been married now for almost 26 years. And that one worked because we didn't have any religious differences whatsoever. In fact, we worked together on several different churches. First at St. John's Cathedral, where we now still attend. But I have to say, the two things that made any difference in my life that really mattered much was the Lord and my wife Sarah. You know, I probably would still be working in the mine if things hadn't happened. My father, I mentioned my father. I was in seminary. I got a phone call from my mom. It was right before Christmas. I was in Kentucky, she was in Golden. And she said, George, your daddy died today. He was 51, died at the mine. And I think, God, I'm so... And the mine is closed down. I've been there since. They closed it all down. It's all the guys that used to work there, those that are still alive, don't have jobs anymore. It was in Wyoming. I thank God that my life has taken so many different turns. And I'm so happy that I get to paint. I get to go to my studio every day. I'm out of my wife's hair. Then I change back into clothes that aren't covered with paint and I go home. And I'm just so thankful. And this thing was all put together real quick because folks said, Don said, can you come on up and talk? I said, about what? I don't know, about you and about your painting. I don't know what. I spent some time down in the Southwest too. Santa Fe especially, but other places too. And so I still sell a lot of paintings, Southwest paintings. That was my interpretation of St. Peter. Take it up just a little higher. Where it says, Jesus told him, when Simon Peter was a young man, he said, when you're an old man, they'll tie up your hands and take you where you don't want to go, indicating what manner of death he was going to have. But, so I painted Peter as it's a watercolor, as an old man. That was in the church where I was. That was an Indian girl. She was on the reservation. She didn't have those clothes, but she was on the place in Canada. She was such a beautiful, sweet girl, and I guess she still do well. She's got a job in a casino in Alberta now. I painted a lot of icons. Not many people paint anymore because you don't paint with oil or watercolor. The way they did it, on a board that's aged, so it won't wilt, warp, and then a mixture of marble dust and some other things. And then it's painted stroke by stroke by stroke by stroke by stroke by stroke. First one color, then another color. This was the family album of the early church. They didn't have photographs, but people wanted to know, well, what did Jesus look like? What did St. Paul look like? What did Mary look like? Nobody knew, and so our family album, the church's family album, was in these old kinds of icons. And then the background would always be 23, 22 karat gold. I discovered that people weren't making them anymore. This was about 40 years ago. And so I started making them just to try to preserve a dying art form. And I ended up teaching iconography in many different places, including Gethsemane, which was the abbey where, well, gosh, a lot of famous people were there, including Thomas Merton, who I got to meet. Thomas Merton was at the Abbey of Gethsemane in Kentucky, outside of Bardstown, Kentucky, where I taught some of their monks how to paint icons. And they're just very, very special family photo of the faith. This icon that I did under glass, I made it look old, because that's how many of them look, and that hangs in our house now. That was a wedding gift to my wife Sarah from me.
That's it. That's it.
Good. There's no rhyme or reason or continuity.